Hi, Jane.
Hi.
I'm so happy that you're here. And I'm so grateful that you're the first one starting this entire interview series because it was your story that helped me open up my heart about my relationship with my mother. And I'm just interested in investigating relationships, family relationships, in a way that is not often talked about. And in this case, I'm interested in your story about your relationship with your child, your relationship with your mother, and feel free to share anything that you would like or say that you just don't feel comfortable sharing things. This is just a casual conversation and I'm just interested in your experience.
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good.
Good. So on the topic of becoming a parent later in life, what was your age when you became a parent?
I was 45 when I gave birth to my son, and actually not long before my 46th birthday. So, yeah, that was that. But I was going to say, yes, I was well and truly, as the medical profession call it, a geriatric mother. Which, yeah.
From what age are we calling it geriatric?
Well, I thought it was if you were 40 plus, which I found was kind of offensive enough. But apparently it is if you're 35 or above, you're called a geriatric mother.
That is absolutely bizarre for me. 35 and up, you're a geriatric mother.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you're more likely to have complications during the pregnancy and you're more likely to have issues with the pregnancy? Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what it's about. And there are statistics that is the case. However, that's putting everybody together in a big lump. That's a big generalization rather than looking at each individual as they come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because it was interesting because when I became pregnant, there were all these discussions, and there was chat about testing to see if my child was likely to have Down syndrome and things like that. And what they said to me was, because they tended to treat me as a number rather than who I was as an individual. And they said that, if I can remember this correctly, it's a while ago now, that it was when you're 40 or above, then your likelihood of your child being Down syndrome is 1 in 100. And so there are ways of testing for that. A lot of them felt too intrusive to me, so they can take some of the amniotic fluid, but that means actually inserting something into your womb to draw out some of the amniotic fluid to test it. And I just felt that was way too invasive. For me, that's the baby space, and we shouldn't be intruding into that space. So there were other ways of doing it, and I chose for the non-invasive route, where they take a scan, and I think they measure the thickness of the neck or something like that, and and then they look at your lifestyle and your health as a mother, and they work it out from there. So that's what I did, and I went from 1 in 100 to. It's the sort of, I have this brain that remembers not, random bits of information. Much people say, how did you remember that? But this was significant. So it was like 1 in 1,269, which is a much smaller likelihood than the vast majority of pregnant women, full stop. So, regardless of age, it sort of was a big eye-opener and a bit of a shocker for me that this was the perceived idea around me as an older mum, that there would be inevitably, because of my age, these complications. Yeah.
And the perception that first you were given a very scary number and you had to go find your own way to figure out that that is so far from the truth.
Yeah, that's right. And then you also have decisions like, okay, if that is the case, how are we going to approach going forward from here? You know, so there are a lot of, from something that is the most natural thing in the world, that we are here to do, where we are here to procreate and have children, and it's, you know, one of the most natural things we can do as a living being. And suddenly you're filled with a lot of fear, actually, which isn't good. And it's not the way you want things to go, because you have this desire for it to be a very beautiful and enriching and special and wonderful time. And suddenly there's all of this, or there was for me anyway, these sort of big questions, big doubts, big fears. And it did really open up my eyes that there are so many parents out there that are also have big question marks, have concerns, and worries and fears through pregnancy. And for me, that's such a shame, because it is a beautiful process to go. Process, that sounds weird. Beautiful experience to go through. I mean, it's a miracle. It is just extraordinary. You go from tiny microscopic cells to creating this extraordinary being. Yeah.
How was the pregnancy experience for you? How did you, as someone who had this experience later in life, how did you go through the actual experience of the pregnancy?
Well, I had the beginning of the first trimester was was a little bit emotional and slightly concerning, because I had previously miscarried, and that has nothing to do with age. That's, sadly, it is very, very common for women to miscarry, and it is heartbreaking, and it's something that people don't realize. It's kind of almost considered as, well, it's a miscarriage, so it just happens. And personally, I don't think there's enough emotional support around it. If you're surrounded by people who are really great at supporting you, then that's fine. But even then, well, it's not fine. But even then, it's something that is, I don't believe that women and fathers, because they have also lost the child, are given enough space to grieve the loss of that child. And miscarriages can happen for all sorts of different reasons, and a lot of the time it is because that child wasn't developing the way that it was healthy for them to develop. So it is a natural instinct of the body to get rid of that fetus. But sometimes it can be preventable. It might be, from what I understand, progesterone deficiency, which could easily be avoided. So I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done around the whole area of miscarriage to support people who've been through it. However, that kind of affected how I felt in the first trimester of my pregnancy. So I had some symptoms that were similar to what I'd felt before I miscarried in my first trimester. And I contacted the general thing that happened when I contacted my GP surgery was that they were just like, well, just keep an eye on it, and it was basically the impression that I got from it. Well, there's nothing really that we can do. Either you will carry to full term or you won't. And that's that. And so I thought, okay, right. So I spoke to a medical herbalist who's a friend of mine, and she'd been through a similar experience. And she said, right, I'm going to send you some herbs and I want you to take these straight away. It's quite possibly, from what you've described, a progesterone deficiency. So I took the herbal medicine for the first trimester and the symptoms passed. So I'm so glad I did that. I don't know if I would have miscarried, but I certainly wasn't willing to take the risk. And then...
Can I ask, just so we mention, what were your symptoms? Just so people who don't know about it are able to recognize it if it ever happens.
Well, for me, I think you kind of intuitively know that something is wrong when you're a mum, when you're pregnant. So when I miscarried, I intuitively felt something is not right here. So with the second time round, and basically it's kind of like period pain cramps. So that was the thing that was the most telling thing. And you get a little bit of discharge as well. But that doesn't mean that you're necessary, because as it worked out that I didn't, hang on, did I get, no, I don't think I got, I think I'm trying to remember now if I think the discharge was just the first time. So it was the cramps. That's the main thing that was the warning sign. Because you can get some, God, this is where it's so long ago, I've forgotten all the bits and pieces. But all the names of the different things, but you can get later on in pregnancy, you can get like contractions that might feel a bit similar, but that's something quite different. This was very much, that's the nearest I could think of it is period pain cramps. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Like I wouldn't have known, because you mentioned it before that you were feeling similar symptoms or similar signs in the first trimester, and that's what made you go to the medical herbalist friend.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it was a similar thing happening. But fortunately, this time I didn't, and I'm certain it's because I did take in my own intervention, because I know that some women sadly miscarry many times. And it almost seems like a bit of pot luck whether they actually carry through to full term or not. So yeah, second trimester was great. That's when I kind of felt most comfortable, and I could really relax more into being pregnant without feeling like incapacitated through lack of breath and having your sleep affected. So yes, second trimester was great, actually. Third trimester was also okay, but that's when you start to get into the real nitty-gritty of stuff of, now all my internal organs are being squished. So and that is just obviously what carries you through is the absolute love that you've got for this being inside you. And and you're just like, oh well, he's obviously pushing his foot right into my ribs, and that's really quite painful, but it's okay. And yes, I will stretch out my back by just leaning over the top of this exercise ball and just taking some pressure off my spine and my back and things. So, yeah, and then things like I'm a very active person, and I really feel it if I don't get out for a good walk each day. And so I was thinking, right, that I remember one time I just thought, that's it, I'm going out for a walk. Big stomach, just fitting the rain, because it was chucking it down with rain, fitting the raincoat over the top of the stomach. And then I went out for a walk, and fortunately I had my phone on me, and I got a bit further away and I thought, gosh, I'm really short of breath. This isn't so great. And I thought, I'll turn around and I'll go back. And I had to go up a bit of an uphill thing. And then I just thought, no, I actually feel awful. I have no breath. So I sat down on a wall and I phoned my husband and just said, I can't get back to the house. I'm sitting on this road. Can you come and collect me? And he was just like, what? I was like in the car, collected me, brought me back. So that was a bit worrying. So my advice is, don't overdo it in the third trimester. Anyway, so that was that. Yeah, so that was fine. And then there's this real desire to get really prepared for how you're going to have your baby in the third trimester. So, and I think, we all have now, there are different options, and depending on how your pregnancy is, you're advised to do different things. And sometimes it's really helpful advice, and sometimes, like in the case of mine, I don't think it particularly was. In fact, it wasn't. But the main thing is that you're wanting to have as close to your ideal birth as you can, because for me, it's such a sacred thing to give birth. It's incredibly beautiful. Even if it's not the way you want it to be, it's still an extraordinary experience to go through.
What was your ideal birth?
My ideal birth, because I was being told so many times, your age. So, but my ideal birth would have been a water birth, in one of the water birth suites at the hospital, so that if anything had gone wrong, I have got a very practical head on me in many respects. I just thought, we're right there if something does go wrong. But that's what I wanted to do. They had 2 very nice water birth suites, really very, like the difference between that and the labour wards is just night and day. And I kind of would wish that for all women, that they would have a really nice, safe environment in which to give birth. If I'd been younger, I would have wanted a home water birth. If I'd been younger, there you go. I've sort of bought into it in some way, haven't I? But yes, I would have done that. But yeah, that's what I planned for.
And what happened instead?
Well, I kind of got on the last time I saw, I presume because I was over 40, when I became pregnant, I did have a fantastic midwife. She was wonderful, but I was also put onto the books of a consultant, and I saw her, and right up until the last scan that I had with her, she said on the last scan, this is a perfect pregnancy, textbook pregnancy. And then in the same sentence, she said, I think we'll go for a cesarean, won't we? And I was just then, my husband was with me, and both of our jaws hit the ground, as in, this is a textbook pregnancy. You know that I'm a healthy individual. Why would I go straight for a cesarean as my first option? And I mean, a cesarean is not an easy option. It's like major surgery. And from what I understand from women who have had cesarean sections, it takes a long time to recover from it. And there's other things as well that don't necessarily help the child. So, and I thought, fine, if I had complications and there was an issue and they really advised me medically, you really should go for a cesarean because of X, Y, and Z. Fine, absolutely. But to go from, this is a textbook perfect pregnancy, let's go for a cesarean. So I just said, I would like to go for a natural birth as a first resort, and only go to cesarean if it's necessary, if the baby, either the baby or myself, or I am in danger. And I said, if that's all right with you. And she said, oh, no, it's your pregnancy. It's your, it's your choice. But, a lot of people, because I was so sure about what I wanted, a lot of people would go, well, that's the consultant saying that, and it would be a perfectly natural thing to, especially when you're in that very vulnerable stage of your third trimester, you are very emotionally open and vulnerable. A lot of people would have said, okay, right, that's what the consultant says, so I'm going to go with it. So there was absolutely nothing that she was saying medically that required me to have a cesarean at that stage.
Yeah. Why do you think that was her first suggestion then?
I think it can only be because of my age.
Is it purely an age thing?
Purely an age thing, yeah.
That is shocking.
I mean, it is. I don't know if she had other statistics available to her. Presumably she did, which is why she said it. But again, it was this thing of, she saw everything and everything was fine. So that was a massive leap, an assumption that things would not be fine for me. And there had been this sort of hanging over me throughout my pregnancy, this kind of pressure and this, well, you need to just watch it because of your age, which is very wearing and doesn't make you feel particularly supported, which is what you need. Yeah.
Emotionally, how did you experience becoming a mother or having a family?
It was the most extraordinary feeling after when we brought my son home. I remember it's this thing of this precious, precious little being. And I get so emotional thinking about it. But it is this thing of, I remember looking at him when he was still very young, like when we would, maybe it was like a couple of weeks old and I was starting to recover. It took me a while to recover from the birth because of anyway, because of various things that happened around that. I remember looking at him and just actually being struck by this pain, this heartache, this physical feeling inside me, which was actually it was this love, this deep, fierce love that I had for him that actually felt pain. It was extraordinary. And it was this thing of, I love you so much, it's painful. And it was almost overwhelming, this feeling of love. And I just got that feeling of, there really is nothing stronger than this love bond between a mother and a child. And and I can't speak for fathers. I'm sure it's the same for fathers. and I know it's there are different things. It's like somebody did a chart one time. I remember seeing this on a TED talk, and I was thinking, yeah, this is quite true. Is that a mother's, so it was like gauging or plotting a mother's love for their child, and it's like when the baby is born, like the mother's love is like right up here, and it's just consistent along, and and I don't know if this is true. I'm just going on what it said in TED talk and stuff, but this thing of maybe not the love for them, but it's either the connection or the love. I need to check this out. But and the father's was lower. That can be contested. I'm not saying that's the case for all fathers, but it was a bit lower when the baby was born. But as they got older, as the child grew older, then as they're bonding more and more and more with that child, so their love increases, or their connection or their bond increases with the child to come up to where the mother is. But I thought it doesn't surprise me. We're carrying this being inside us for 9 months, literally growing this being inside of us. And is it mitochondria effect or something? I really should have done my research before, reminded myself before this interview. But there is actually this thing which is scientifically proven, that when a child is born, there's been an exchange of cells between the mother and the child. So as the child grows up, so all of us, we still contain our mother's cells within us. And so there's that cellular as well as emotional and spiritual bond there between a mother and a child. I can only speak from a mother's point of view. I can't speak from a father's point of view. So I will leave that to fathers to express themselves. But yeah, so that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it was very interesting because you also mentioned in your question, how did it feel, or what was my experience like having a family? Wow, that's it. It's such an incredible bonding thing. It's difficult to describe, but it also gives you a bit of bonding with other families and other people who are parents, and that's very nice. But it also highlighted to me how it can be, I'm not saying it always is, but it can be quite isolating for people who are not parents, because they don't have that. I felt a lot of shift in how people perceived me once I'd become a mother. From certain people, there was much more of an acceptance of who I was, what I was doing with my life, things like that, which, in my opinion, is not on.
Did you feel their expectation before you became a mother, or was that just a clear shift after was it a realization after you've become a mother, or did you also feel the expectation?
No, I was aware before I became a mother. I was aware that people made assumptions about me because I hadn't had a child, and for many of them, because I hadn't had a child up until my mid-40s, that this was the kind of person I was, and that I didn't like children, or I didn't, I wasn't that kind of caring person because I hadn't gone down that route. And it's there are lots of different reasons for not having children, and they are all valid. It's something that did create a bit of a distance between me and some people who were really quite close to me. It also gave me a bond between people, other women who were also in a situation for whatever reason that at that point they hadn't had a child either, or wouldn't be able to have a child or choose to have a child or what have you. But yeah, so there was a shift, a definite shift. And part of me wanted to question that and say, okay, so why? Why am I more acceptable now than I was when I didn't have a child, when I wasn't a mother? So, but then part of me just thought, just leave it. Just leave it. But that might be something that comes up in another film sometime.
Was it a conscious choice for you to delay having children, or?
Yeah, my choice was that in my mind, I had never met the person that I felt that I wanted to have a family with. So that was, it wasn't until I met my husband, or I'd known him for a long time, but it wasn't until we actually finally got into a relationship that I just thought, no, this guy is going to be a fantastic dad. So, yeah, so it wasn't an accident. It was definitely planned. The pair of us planned it. And yeah, so that was my decision. I didn't want to, I mean, you can never know, and nothing is no decision is foolproof. But yeah, I knew that he really wanted to have kids. I wanted to have kids. And yeah, it seemed like the right time finally.
What was behind your thinking that you are going to wait for the right person? Because some people just go, I'm just going to do it by myself, or I'm going to do it with a donor, or what was the thinking?
I mean, and that's absolutely valid for people to, if they feel able to do that, then absolutely. Mine was, you can only go with your own very personal feelings about it. Mine was, I had seen situations where people I knew were single moms and things like that, and coping brilliantly with it and doing an amazing job and bringing up fantastic children. But I just felt myself that I wasn't, I don't know if I would have been able, I quite possibly would have been able but I just felt that wasn't a route that I consciously wanted to choose to go down. And everybody has their own decisions and thoughts about it, and they're all valid. So yeah, that was, yeah, I wanted to have a unit. I wanted to have the family unit. So yeah.
And now that you have it, how do you feel about it?
It's great. It's great. It's absolutely great. I mean, being a parent, I think, is the toughest job in the world. Because you care. You care about it's like a huge responsibility to bring up this child and do the best you can for this child. And I am just really fortunate in our family unit, in that my husband is a deeply caring man, and he's also very wise, which is great, because he can step back I like to hope I can do a bit of this as well, but we can step back and say, okay, what's happening here? How can we support our son? How can we help him develop things like, or not develop, but protect, because I do believe that children are born with an open mind and integrity in place. And how can we support him to maintain that so that he grows up as a caring, loving man of integrity and honesty and, as much as possible, wisdom. So continues to be our focus, and also the main thing but how do we support him to be happy and healthy? So it's great because we both support each other in that, and we can both contribute ideas, and for me that's just great.
In what ways do you support that open mind that he came in with?
It's about talking about respect, about tolerance, respect, looking at how other people live, where possible, actually experiencing different cultures, although that's often a very money dependent thing. So but also just that talking through things, so and listening to what he has to say, and then if he has any questions, then just chatting through those questions with hopefully a respectful and open mind, and with the intention of being understanding. But also there's the and we're not always, because we are human, but we try our best. That's the thing. I think we're always trying our best to be open-minded ourselves. So I think that's the thing, is not giving up on that, and just I think that's just it.
Remind me, how old is your son now?
He's 10.
And oh yeah, because we've known each other for 2 years now. Do you find it easier, harder, same as 10 years ago to be a parent?
Oh, it's different. It's constantly changing, because different things occur, different challenges come up. When he was very small, I was fairly obsessed with how do we all manage to get enough sleep, which didn't happen, if I'm honest, because he was never a great sleeper. So it's that kind of thing of, so that was a real challenge. And of course, you've got all the usual things when they're growing up, like when they're ill, they seem incredibly ill because they have these really high temperatures, and worry about that, and all that kind of thing. And then it changes to going to school, and how's he going to manage starting at school, or being with a childminder, finding the right childminder. So all of those kind of things. So it's just like the logistical day-to-day stuff taking over. And now it's that kind of thing of when they're discovering more about the world, how do you support them? How are they fitting in with, how is he fitting in with his peer group? And supporting him in that. And of course, that's going to go on for a few years now, through his teens and so on, until he gets to the stage where he's old enough where he finds his own tribe, his own kind of people and his true friends that he shares common stuff with. And then obviously you're still there as a parent, but most of your work is done by that stage. So yeah, that's all I can say is it's different. Each stage is different.
How do you feel like your relationship with your parents and your upbringing influenced or still influences the way that you are parenting?
I think the generations are different. It's definitely a difference in how parenting happens now, I think, for the majority of people than it did back when I was my son's age. And I think we talk a lot more about his feelings and his emotions and how he's relating to his friends and other people at school and so on. And I wish that there'd been more of that kind of discussion when I was growing up. It was kind of very much kind of get on with it. And it's not that they weren't there, they were definitely there. But there wasn't almost kind of coaching. Not that we're really coaching him, but you know what I mean? I guess just by talking about things like emotions and how you're getting on, and it makes it sound like we sit down and have big conversations. We don't. It's just like, how are you? How was today? You know, oh, this bothered me a bit. Oh, how did that, how do you think that's affected you? Or how do you think you might be able to look at that in another way? And that kind of thing is just sort of a few prompts, but it doesn't last for very long. It's just short, brief conversations, but hopefully he knows that he can always come to us if something is bothering him. Whereas it's kind of, I just remember a lot kind of just dealing with stuff, and it was more that I was chatting to my friends about what was going on rather than specifically to my parents. What I do try to, what they were both brilliant at, is an idea of fairness and having an open mind and integrity and respect for people and openness about different cultures as well. Because both my parents worked abroad in their life, so they had a much bigger view, a more of a world view, and so that was great. And just talking about world issues and societal issues and things like that. So we do a little bit with my son, a little bit of that kind of chat, but that will probably become more as he gets older, and we wait for him to ask questions because things are coming up, so when he studies history at school or whatever, then he'll come back with a question, and then we can chat about it. So, which is what my parents did, which was great, really great.
I so admire those daily check-ins. That was something that completely was missing from my childhood, both the small conversations and the big conversations. But I think as a child, those daily, consistent, structured check-ins are actually more important than every now and then having a big sit down. The small everyday stuff is making a much bigger emotional impact on children, I think.
I think what it gives the children is that real feeling, that certainty that the parents have got their back, basically, that they're there. We are your rock. You can come to us at any time because we're here. And a lot of the time it's like, yeah, whatever, yeah. But there's the response, and that's fine. But yeah, and there's always the risk that there might be a child who bottles a bit. Sometimes our son does bottle emotions and things like that. So it's finding a way to sensitively negotiate that so that he doesn't feel railroad. I don't think he ever feels railroaded into opening up at all, because he just won't. You can't do that. So, but hopefully there's always this understanding that we're there for him.
Did you have that kind of a relationship with your parents, that they were your rock and you just felt safe around them?
I think when I was little, absolutely. I think as I grew a bit older, I think, and it could have been, I don't know. I think possibly from like mid-primary school into secondary school, I kind of felt that there was a bit more of a distance. And I'm not really sure why, because they always were there for us. And I think it might just be that thing, maybe certainly with secondary school, where hormones kick in, and your brain rewires, and there's this thing of just the outer world, and there just seems to be more of an awareness of what's going on in the world and society and so on. And it can be quite scary, because when you've been a child, you're in this little, hopefully not for every child by any means, but hopefully you're in this kind of protected, safe environment, and you don't have to think about when I get a job and I have to start looking after myself, or there's less of an awareness of what's going on in terms of world conflicts and things like that when you're little. So I just think I did feel that my parents were my rock then, as my mum was quite a fearsome mama bear when she needed to be. And my dad was just, he both of them worked incredibly hard. But my dad was just, he provided stuff. I mean, the house was there, the house was well maintained, the car worked, it was that kind of thing. Things got painted when they needed painted.
That's what men do. They take care of you through action.
Yeah, that's exactly what my dad did. And I'm, putting this in the frame of, that was very much as it was in that generation. That's the way, so yeah, it was Dad was the main breadwinner, though Mum did work as well. But Mum did, I mean, I'm one of 4 children, so my mum had a lot on her plate, plus all our pets. So,
Big family. Were they still around? Were your parents still around when you became a mum?
My dad, no. He very sadly died before my son was born. And my mum was still alive when my son was born, but she very sadly had Alzheimer's. So she did meet him, and we have really moving bit of footage of her holding him when he was a baby. And just massaging his feet, just holding his feet, holding him, and just, making contact with him. And I know there's a really deep part of her that made that strong connection then with him. And then she died when he was a year old. So, yeah.
So during the first year, you also had to deal with saying goodbye to your mom. I didn't know that. How was that?
It was hard because I was down south and she was up in Scotland, and I would have loved to have been there more for her as she was transitioning. But I did go up and down a little bit, but it's not as much as I would have liked to. I remember when I was pregnant, I would drive through she was down south at that point, and I would drive through to see her as often as I could. But once the wee guy was born, it was, he took up so much of my time. It was really difficult to physically be with her. And, I was just, my mum loved children. And I knew that she wouldn't be able to spend aware time with my son, so with her grandchild. And that was tough. And he didn't have his grandmother. Or his grandfather.
I remember my mom when my grandmother on my mother's side died before I was born. And my grandfather died around when I was age 8, 9, something like that. And I remember seeing my mom at that point when both of her parents died, instantly becoming a child again. And she internalized it in a way that she became an orphan now. And it was very bizarre to see my mom just going back into such a childlike state, just because now she doesn't have her parents. Did you experience anything like that? A transition from having your parents and having one family to then having your own family now?
No, actually, I don't think. I think the hardest bit for me was just the grief from the loss of my parents, and that a little bit of sadness that my son would not be able to spend time with his grandparents. But I don't think there was any major shift in how I related to people after their death. I don't think so. Maybe somebody would tell me different. But I think if anything, it would have had probably the reverse effect of what you've described on me, in that a realization of, well, now there's nobody that I can phone up and go, oh, kind of thing, that I need to step up, and now I need to be a rock. And obviously you don't, or I wouldn't say you don't, obviously there are moments when I'm not at all rock-like. There are often times when I, have big wobbles and doubts and fears and concerns and anger and the whole range of the emotions. But I don't necessarily associate that with being younger or older. That's just the human condition, and it's how you deal with that that's the important thing. But no, I didn't experience anything like you said, I don't think. Of course, what I do have is my fantastic husband, that when I do have wobbles and go, I can't do this and I don't know what I'm doing and things like that, he's there to lend his ear, which is fantastic. And other people will have partners, or they'll have best friends or whoever. And it just depends on who's round about in your immediate circle.
But it also speaks to your maturity. Like, in many ways, your and my experience of family life couldn't be more different from each other. Like, it speaks to how immature my mother was at the same age as you, because it was round about the same age when her parents died. And this was the second time that you mentioned grief. How did you deal with that grief? How did you feel? How did you handle that?
My dad died first, and that was a massive shock to me. Because I said that I'm one of four, but my siblings are, strictly speaking, they're half brothers and sister, different dad. Although that was never a thing when we were growing up. It was didn't really register. But when my dad died, I cried a lot. I was very fortunate in that I was with him when he died. So fantastic unit up in Scotland in the hospital where he died, and they called me in and just said, we think he's, I'd been there earlier in the day, and then they called me when I was on my way home again to say, we think he's on his way out now, so come back. So I went back, and I was fortunately there with him. And I think I let it out by crying. I think I cried bucket loads, and just allowed myself to sob. And I was lucky because my brother, who's next up in age from me, he drove all the way up from England to try and get there before Dad died, but he didn't quite manage it. But he did arrive at the hospital, and so he could say his goodbyes then. And he was just brilliant because he just helped me. He became kind of a rock for me at that time. And just helped me with a lot of the logistical things, which, because you've got so much to organise and you're not in the place to do it at that point, you just want to just be with what you're feeling, and you've got to deal with lawyers and funeral people and make decisions, and it's just like a heavy thing to go through. But he was, so he was just absolutely fantastic. And so kind of together we got through it. And then just in many ways, I was fortunate in that I could then spend the following months just going through all of his stuff and getting his house ready to sell. So, which helped me with the grieving process so that I could just go through that. But it's interesting. I saw once online somebody had done a graphic with grief and loss, and it was it was this box with, like, soon after you lose somebody, there's this huge, big red ball. So it was like touching all the sides. So you feel the grief all the time. And then in time, the ball gets smaller. It's not that you don't feel the grief as strongly, but it just hits the sides. So it hits those points of contact with you less often. So it's that kind of space, is you've got much more space in between those strong moments of grief. And I thought that was brilliant, actually, because that describes pretty well my experience anyway. And when Mum died, it was really hard because she had Alzheimer's. So it was almost like letting her go twice. So the mum that I'd known for so many years, for practically all of my life up to that point, was no longer there. Or there might have been tiny little moments where she came back. And then there was this other part of her that I didn't know so well that remained. And then, of course, when she died properly, that was, she was gone. So that was hard. But strangely, because I'd been through Dad's death only 4 years earlier, I kind of knew what I was doing emotionally, if that makes sense. It's kind of, I could reconcile myself with it more effectively. That sounds almost, my dad was a scientist. It sounds almost like my dad would have done. So yeah, so that was, and there were all four of us gathered round, grieving in equal measure around my mum's death. Not that the others didn't grieve my dad's death, they did, but it's that kind of thing of, it was very much my responsibility to deal with everything to do with Dad, and that was fine. Of course, it was my responsibility, but with Mum, it was kind of shared. Yeah.
In what positive ways do you feel like that your parents were still alive in you?
My desire to care and to do good, to be fair, to always strive to do the best I can do. My love of nature. They both loved nature deeply. That's why I love to be in the garden. That's my happy place. The garden, or in woods, or by the sea, or on a mountain. Yeah, I think striving, I don't always achieve it, but striving to have integrity.
Thank you. I feel like that's a lovely note to end on. And something I realized just recently was that obviously it's my relationship with my own parents that colored my view on a parent-child relationship. And I get a lot of healing from stories that are vastly different from mine, because it just allows me to fill the little gaps that I gathered along the way. And I've done a lot of that gap filling for myself, but it's hugely helpful for me to be able to listen to other people's stories and be a little part of their lives in some way, because it just gives me things. It gives me feelings and, in a weird way, secondhand experiences that I haven't had. And I just hugely enjoyed listening to your story, because there's just so much love in your family, and there's such a strong sense of unity and togetherness, and it was just beautiful to listen to it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate your time. And I really encourage that if you have anyone in your circles, any friends that you feel like would like to have the opportunity to open up, because very often we just don't have the opportunity to have someone who asks us about these things and who listens. So if there's anyone that you know about, send them my way, and I would love to hear their stories as well.